Have you ever found yourself staring at the ceiling in the middle of the night, wondering why your pain seems to have become your identity? Why is it that even when life is not forcing us to suffer, so many of us choose discomfort, deprivation, or even self-punishment? Why do you sometimes feel most alive or most good precisely when you are enduring hardship, denying yourself, or even pushing yourself to the breaking point? Maybe you've seen it in your own life. You skip meals to lose weight, not just for health, but for some strange sense of purity. You stay in a toxic relationship, quietly bearing everything, because you believe you deserve to suffer, or even that there's something noble in enduring pain. Or maybe you're drawn to hustle culture, pushing yourself to exhaustion, as if endless sacrifice is the price you must pay to be worthy. But why? Why is suffering not just something we try to avoid, but often secretly, even proudly, something we seek out, defend, or even compete over? Is your suffering just a sad fact of life? Or is it doing something for you, something deep, even dangerous? Today, we're going to rip the mask off one of the darkest and most seductive myths ever created. The ascetic ideal, the belief that suffering, self-denial, and pain are not just inevitable, but meaningful, even necessary for a higher or purer life. We're diving straight into Nietzsche's most explosive questions. By the end, you'll discover what your desire for suffering really means, and you'll leave with new tools to transform how you relate to pain, meaning, and the search for yourself. Let's start this journey together by daring to ask the one question most people never face. What is your suffering doing for you? Let's be honest. Most of us have been told by religion, by culture, even by motivational quotes that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That suffering is a sign of virtue, a gateway to spiritual greatness, or a badge of honor. But where does this idea come from? And more importantly, why does it stick, generation after generation, even among people who claim to be modern, rational, or beyond old superstitions? Nietzsche calls this deep-rooted pattern the ascetic ideal. But what does that actually mean? Ascetic ideal, in plain language, is the belief that denying yourself, embracing hardship, or suppressing your natural desires is not just good, but the highest good. Think of monks who fast for weeks, or athletes who torture their bodies, or artists who believe they must suffer for their art. But look closer. How many times have you felt a strange pride in denying yourself something? Ever caught yourself feeling clean or better for skipping a pleasure? Or maybe, deep down, felt that suffering was a kind of proof you were worthy of respect or even love? Nietzsche argues this is not some quirk. It's a universal script running through history, crossing cultures and classes. He points out that the ascetic ideal is so powerful, it even infects those who claim to reject it. Even atheists, scientists, or rational thinkers often just shift the suffering, glorifying relentless work, obsession with health, or sacrificing everything for truth or a cause. Here's the shock. Nietzsche says the real reason this ideal survives is because it gives us something we crave more than pleasure meaning. Think about it. In a world that often feels random, empty, or even hostile, suffering can feel like a way to matter. If your pain means something, at least you're not lost. At least your suffering is for a higher purpose. So, what does this mean for you? It means that far from being a sign of weakness or just bad luck, your attraction to suffering may be your way of finding meaning, identity, even dignity in a world that can feel meaningless or chaotic. Maybe you cling to pain not because you want to hurt, but because you're desperate for your pain to have value. Ask yourself, where in your life do you find yourself justifying pain, struggle, or sacrifice because without it, you fear there's nothing left? Your suffering is never just suffering. It's often a secret strategy for creating meaning, belonging, or even superiority, especially when nothing else seems to work. Let's push deeper. Nietzsche isn't just talking about ancient monks. He's talking about you, right now, in your daily life. He asks, what does the ascetic ideal really do for a person? Answer, it gives you power over something you can't control: the chaos, randomness, and emptiness of existence. If life is full of pain, but you can't change the pain, at least you can claim that it matters. By choosing to suffer, you transform helplessness into power, pain into purpose. Let's use a simple metaphor. Imagine you're in a boat, lost at sea, and a storm is raging. You can't control the storm, but you can choose to see your struggle as a heroic journey. Suddenly, your pain becomes a story, not just a fact. Your suffering becomes your badge of honor. Nietzsche says the ascetic ideal is a powerful psychological tool. It lets you turn your pain into a weapon against despair. Instead of being crushed by the meaninglessness of life, you become the author of your own drama. But there's a price. If you're always seeking suffering for meaning, you may end up addicted to pain, defined by struggle, or even hostile to anything that feels too easy or joyful. So, how does this play out in your life? Do you find yourself sabotaging happiness or distrusting anything that feels too comfortable? Do you believe that easy is bad and only suffering is real? Do you chase struggle after struggle, not because you love pain, but because you're terrified of emptiness? Ask yourself, where in your story are you choosing pain not because you have to, but because it feels safer than the void? Here's where Nietzsche drops his real bombshell. He argues that, for many people, the ascetic ideal is less about becoming holy and more about having something, anything, to hold on to. And if all else fails, suffering itself becomes the goal. He calls this the will to nothingness. Let's break that down. Instead of pursuing joy, creativity, or growth, you end up pursuing absence, emptiness, or annihilation just to avoid the terror of having no meaning at all. Think of people who embrace extreme diets, punishing workouts, or endless self-criticism not to be healthier, but simply to feel in control. Or those who become addicted to drama, conflict, or even failure because the chaos is at least something. Nietzsche warns, this is the darkest danger of the ascetic ideal. It doesn't just glorify suffering, it can become a death drive, a longing for nothingness. Sound dramatic? Look around. How often do you, or people you know, chase pain for its own sake? How often do you find meaning in your wounds, your scars, or your disappointments so much so that letting go of pain feels like letting go of your identity? Why does this matter for you right now? Because if you find yourself stuck in cycles of self-sabotage, chronic self-denial, or an endless search for problems to fix, you might be caught in the grip of the will to nothingness. You're not alone, but you can become aware and choose differently. Next time you find yourself drawn to pain, ask, am I seeking meaning, or am I just running from emptiness? Nietzsche isn't just concerned with individuals. He's ruthless in exposing how societies weaponize the ascetic ideal. Look at history. Who benefits when everyone believes suffering is noble? Nietzsche says those in power, but also those who feel powerless. He argues that slave morality, the morality of those who feel weak or oppressed, uses the ascetic ideal as a weapon. By glorifying suffering, humility, and sacrifice, the powerless gain a new power. They turn their pain into virtue, their lack into superiority. Ever noticed how martyrdom is praised, while ambition or self-assertion is condemned? Ever seen people who can't achieve power themselves become holier than thou, judging others for not sacrificing enough? This is what Nietzsche calls ressentiment, a French word for a kind of deep, simmering resentment that transforms powerlessness into a strange moral authority. Here's the danger. The morality of suffering doesn't just help individuals cope, it can infect whole cultures, punishing anyone who dares to live differently. So, what's the impact on you? Do you ever judge others or yourself for not working hard enough, not suffering enough, or not being selfless enough? Have you noticed how sometimes groups or even families use guilt or sacrifice as a way to control, manipulate, or shame? Ask yourself, are you living your life or someone else's story about what it means to be good? Let's pause and recap. We've uncovered 3 dangerous truths about the ascetic ideal. It promises meaning in suffering but may leave you addicted to pain. It can spiral into the will to nothingness, where suffering becomes its own reward. It fuels social games of resentment, where pain is used to judge, control, or even dominate. You might be wondering, if suffering is such a trap, is there any way out? What would it mean to break free not by running from pain, but by seeing it for what it is? Why, let's bring these ideas down to earth with a story. Imagine yes, you are living through a rough patch. Maybe you just lost your job, or ended a long relationship, or simply feel empty for no clear reason. You wake up each day with a heavy weight on your chest. To make sense of it, you start to believe your suffering is for a reason. Maybe you tell yourself it's building your character, or that you're paying some kind of moral debt. You even begin to refuse comfort from friends, avoiding joy because it feels unearned. Instead, you double down on your pain, telling yourself it's necessary, maybe even noble. But here's what Nietzsche would challenge you to see. Is your pain truly making you stronger, or just giving you something to cling to? Are you growing, or just surviving? Now, imagine you start to question this. What if suffering is not automatically meaningful? What if you could step outside the script of the ascetic ideal and create your own meaning, one not built on endless sacrifice, but on actual transformation? This is not about denying pain, it's about refusing to let pain define you. What story are you telling yourself about your suffering right now? Is it really yours, or just inherited from centuries of ascetic thinking? So, let's zoom out. Why does all of this matter? Because the ascetic ideal is everywhere, hiding in your motivations, in your relationships, in your society's deepest values. You see it in self-help books that glorify grind and hustle, as if burnout is a badge of honor. You see it in families that praise silent suffering over honest communication. You see it in politics, religion, and even modern science, where the pursuit of truth becomes a new kind of self-denial, a relentless quest for objectivity at the cost of personal joy. Nietzsche's warning is clear. If you don't see the script, you'll keep playing the same role over and over. But here's the good news. Once you recognize the game, you can rewrite the rules. You are not condemned to seek suffering for its own sake. You are free to question every story, every value, every demand for sacrifice, especially those that come from outside you or from old, unexamined habits. As Nietzsche puts it, he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. But the why must be yours, not borrowed from the priests, from the crowd, or even from your pain. So, what does this mean for your journey? It means you are invited right now to examine your relationship with suffering, to ask, where have I made pain my purpose? Where can I choose transformation instead? It means you can honor your struggles without worshiping them. You can face pain, use it, even learn from it. But you do not have to make it your God. Let's bring it all together. Today, you've faced the dark secret of the ascetic ideal, the idea that suffering is automatically meaningful, even necessary for goodness. You've seen how this belief creeps into your life, how it can seduce you into cycles of pain, and how it can become a weapon for yourself and others. You've discovered how the desire for suffering is really a desire for meaning and power in a chaotic world. How the will to nothingness can trap you in endless cycles of pain for pain's sake. How the morality of resentment can turn suffering into a tool of social control. But most importantly, you've learned that you can break the cycle. You can stop making pain your purpose. You can choose to see suffering for what it is, a fact of life, not a virtue. You can reclaim your power to create meaning by living, loving, and transforming, not just enduring. Your tools for the journey. Question every story that glorifies suffering. Ask yourself, is this pain truly making me grow or just keeping me stuck? Refuse to let your wounds become your only identity. Practice creating meaning by connecting, by acting, by daring to live beyond old scripts. If you take one thing from this video, let it be this: you are more than your pain. Your life's value is not measured by how much you can endure, but by what you can become. So, what will you do next? How will you rewrite your own script about suffering and meaning? Let us know in the comments. What's one story about pain you're ready to question, or one way you'll start building meaning outside the old scripts? If this video spoke to you, subscribe to MindMirror and join us on the journey to deeper self-awareness and transformation. And if you want to go further, check out our next video where we'll explore the surprising psychology behind why you crave control and how to find real freedom, even in chaos. Thank you for daring to question your suffering. Keep going, your story is just beginning. The ideas explored in this video are for philosophical and psychological exploration and are not intended as professional advice. Viewers are encouraged to engage in their own critical thinking and further research, and to consult with qualified professionals for personal concerns.